Hi, welcome to the sixth part of the lecture on discrimination in the labor market. This lecture is part of the lecture series of the General Economics, which is an introduction to the feminist school in economics. And this lecture series is prepared for the Middlesex Technical University, Northern Cyprus campus. In this part, we will start looking to the theories of the discrimination, and note that the theories represented by Blau, Ferber, and Winkler are very much in neoclassical taste. I mean, neoclassical taste, and framework is also. Which I mean, it is within the neoclassical framework. Individuals are independent from each other. You don't have a social framework, social structure, and pretty much the discrimination is explained within this framework, where individuals are independent from each other and interacting through the price mechanism of the markets. And in the first case, model, which is provided by Becker, who is the same Becker who explained the marriage with his model. Basically, in this model, Becker assumed discrimination is because certain people have a discriminatory taste. What does it mean? That means when a woman involved in their economic interactions, they are feeling unhappy. You have basically three different types of discriminatory tastes in this model. One is the discriminatory employers who feel bad, who feel displeasure when they employ women. And just like in other neoclassical models, that pleasure is pretty much personal, intrinsic. That is their preference, independent of social interactions, and even if social interactions play a part, we think it's not important in their economic decision making process. Alternatively, workers might have a discriminatory taste, which means if they work with a female worker, in that case they might feel unhappy. Not the same model can also be applied to any other type of discrimination of gender preference, discrimination of race, whatever you can think of, whatever type of discrimination you might think of. The third type is discrimination territory customers. In that case, the customers feel the distaste, this utility, when basically they get a service, or I don't know, the product they get is produced by a woman, and this is again intrinsic. So, what will be the consequences, and how would market react in all three cases? Well, let's start with the customer discrimination. Well, it is basic. Customer discrimination is actually one discrimination which might basically make survive even in a neoclassical model. That basically means that if a customer is getting the service it gets, or if the product it gets is produced by a woman, they feel a disutility, and we don't know the source of this disutility. Basically, there are interesting cases of customer discrimination, and in some cases not against the woman. For example, in United States, first black player appeared in the baseball team in the South, the racist part of the part of the United States with sustained slavery as an institution. The watchers, the spectators, have walked out of the stadium, for example. That's one case of the active customer discrimination. And basically, if you have that kind of a customer, of course, this is a distaste, which you can take at D. that this taste can be that is a reduction in the utility you got from the product. Assuming it doesn't bring the utility to the zero, and even if it brings the zero, the more you consume the product, the more utility you got from the last unit, so you can get it to a positive amount. Basically, in order to balance this discriminatory taste, this utility, you need to decrease the price of the product you take from the outputs produced by women. So if this is the case, actually, this might be very well an explanation why occupations filled by women usually, the wages are lower, mainly in those occupations. Maybe because of discriminatory taste. People knowing that those outputs are produced by the woman, they feel a displeasure, and displeasure. Because of this displeasure, you need to lower the price of the products produced by those industries. Although pretty much the customer discrimination is interpreted in this way. Actually, customers should not care in neoclassical economics when they don't see the woman, the producers of what they consume, which means, as long as they don't see, as long as the workers are actually working in a factory or behind a counter, they should not care as much. Is it really so? Maybe at least you have some examples where this might not be so. For example, I know very well some friends who really feel very scared and displeasure when they see there is a woman pilot in them. When they understand there's a woman pilot in the airplane, although they don't see the woman pilot. When they learn there's a woman pilot, they might be scared. Although you might say they still hear the voice of the woman pilot, maybe. But I still think that directly they are not coming into contact with the pilot in that case. But anyway, so this idea usually it is thought that it is more effective when there is a face-to-face contact with the workers, and it's not that effective when there is no face-to-face contact with the workers. And it's used to explain, for example, you have more white women in the restaurants as waitresses. Here it is a different type of discrimination, of course, and you have usually black women at the back of the counters and working in the kitchen. In the United States, for example, in some places. What about the workers' discrimination? In that case, workers feel a displeasure when they work with a woman. So in order to balance this displeasure, they need to get a higher wage. To compensate this displeasure in addition to the work they are performing from the job. If all male workers feel that way, what will happen? What will happen is actually you will separate the workforce. You might separate it to different departments, have women in one department, men in the other department. If there is not enough women working, to fill a department, to fill a factory, you cannot find that many women in a neighborhood, in a city, in a place, or it's difficult to find a woman with sufficient level of qualities to fill the jobs, basically. You might end up employing women also. But if you have sufficient number of women, in that case, you might have workplaces for women and workplaces of men, so that men can work in a separate workplace without them having this displeasure. Although the question is again become, even if they don't have interaction, knowing that more women are actually coming to their profession, is this something that is disturbing men? And especially, you might ask the question, are the men especially disturbed when the women are getting to the higher positions? And here we are coming to the previous article's point. The social structure, fixed social structure might create an efficiency, basically, in this case. The third model is the employer discrimination model. This is the most studied one, employer discrimination model. The employer himself actually is getting a displeasure when he employs women. I don't know, women might also feel that kind of displeasure. If that's the case, in that case, women need to pay less to women need to be paid less, basically, because this displeasure should also be compensated by excessive revenue to the employer. But in this case, this is the case basically where, and we don't assume there's a social structure, kind of a social organization which is protecting this discrimination. So each employer is separately, and they won't be rewarded by the public or consumers for their decisions. If that's the case, in that case, discriminatory employers will feel a higher cost because workers, female workers, they are missing will be more productive than male workers. So the non-discriminatory employers, we assume there is an absence of customer discrimination and worker discrimination. We don't see how the three interact actually. That's the problem, but so far it goes. So employers don't feel customer discrimination and worker discrimination. So the non-discriminatory ones get the most productive workers, and those most productive workers produce more. The prices go down, and they will be survivors of the competition. Unless you have a monopsony case, or unless you have an inefficiency in the market. I mean, there's something that protects those employers, then discrimination can exist. So, employer discrimination itself, and this is maybe why it is studied that much, is assumed to disappear in the market economy. How fast? We don't know. Maybe it is disappearing. Maybe this might be true, but maybe this disappearance might not be fast enough. Maybe, but still, you might also think the other idea, the social framework itself, might be also one reason that is creating discrimination. The second model is statistical discrimination, which is basically people are actually not discriminating the woman because of a taste, but they rather make an assumption on the woman. So they're not able to get full information on the personal characteristics of the person. So when, as a result, I cannot understand fully how productive the person in front of me is. So when I evaluate that person, I take the group averages. So when I have a male person, I think overall male characteristics, and when I think a female person, I might take the overall female characteristics. And if men are more productive than women, then I might rather hire men, because I might think, on average, that man has a higher chance of being more productive than women. Is this the case? Well, I had in the United States, I had met a businessman, and Turkish businessman. I know there, and we kind of family friends, so we could be able to speak. He told me actually, whenever I hear a name with a black sounding name, in that case, I'm not hiring that person. And sometimes I test, I just get the person to the interview with black sounding name, and then when I see that person is really black, so that test is whether that name is associated with the black person, basically, then I understand I'm doing the right thing. So statistical discrimination has a logic actually, and that is done by other basically institutions also. For example, insurances, they look to your characteristics. If you are young, they assume you are more healthy, for example. So, however, it is still a form of discrimination. So it still doesn't take the person as individual, but certain characteristics are actually used to make assumptions on those individuals. And sometimes statistical discrimination can also reinforce itself. For example, women are basically working at the short-term jobs. As a result, they need to quit from the jobs more. But when a research is done on the woman and man, whether which one is more likely to quit from the jobs, women are seen as more like the workers who are more likely to quit the jobs. But that's because the job characteristics they are working in actually forcing them to do so. So part of the statistical discrimination might be also prejudices that are very much caused by the statistical discrimination itself. Anyway, we will continue with the other two models in the next part. See you in the next part.